All right, welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Super excited. I'm your host here, Mike Cunningham, National Sales Manager. And let me just take a quick second. I am always floored with anybody who listens to this podcast. As we were talking with today's guest during our pre-interview, I said, it's kind of hard to listen to our podcast. There are some amazing podcasts that are 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes long, much easier to digest. When you commit to press and play on this podcast, you're committing to usually minimum of an hour and probably closer to 2 hours. And our numbers are bigger and better than ever. And that's a direct reflection on you as the listener. And most importantly, our guests that we have on this podcast. So I'm just so humbled, so thankful that you are here today and that you chose to press play, because you got a lot of other options and a lot of things tugging at your time. And I don't take it lightly that you spend your time with us. And with us today, I'm super, I'm always saying I'm super excited. And I am, because I literally, this is kind of like Christmas for me. Every day I get to wake up and do interviews with amazing coaches around the country. And this one, I could probably throw a rock and hit where he is. He's not too far from us here in Champaign, Illinois. And he's got an exciting new title, which is even more fun. So help me welcome today the director of track and field for Kent State University. One of my favorite trivia questions, we're going to get into that, is at Kent State. I love it. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Nate Fanger. Nate, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you guys doing, man?
Awesome, man. So do you know the trivia question that Kent State is in? That's one of my favorite trivia questions ever.
If it comes to Kent State, I don't know if it revolves around the four dead in Ohio or the.
No, man, it's all positive. So I'm going to ask you the trivia question, and then because there's multiple answers. So name the schools, name the colleges that their mascot does not end in S.
Oh,
so you have Ohio State Buckeyes, right? That's the most popular. It always ends with S, right? The Auburn Tigers, Troy Trojans. What are there's actually quite a bit, but which ones can you think of that actually don't end with S?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right. Because you got the Longhorns or the Seminoles. Everything is SS. Tar Heels. Jeez.
What's Kent State's?
We have a Golden Flash.
There it is. There's one. That's what I love about Kent State. You're the Kent State Golden Flash. You don't end with S.
Yep, doesn't have an S.
University of Illinois, the Fighting Illini.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I gave you a couple hints. Come on. I know you can think of at least one. And there's some no trick questions. These are some big schools. This isn't like, finding some small junior college that I used to work at in Kansas. Like these are big name schools that have mascots that don't end, or, I don't know if it'd be mascot or whatever it is, but don't end with S.
You care. I so could care less about mascots.
That's my favorite thing in the world.
That's like they have a mascot. I wouldn't even known what it is.
All right. I'll give you one hint, then I'll name a few of them, because other people right now are listening, yelling out their guesses right now.
Mine doesn't have an S.
All right.
What do you got?
All right. I'm gonna give you a hint. This school is not in a conference, but kind of is in a conference, but it's not in a conference. Big school.
Oh, well, it'd be Notre Dame.
Bam, Fighting Irish. There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Some others that I've learned, the Stanford Cardinal.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, but they're a tree. So that's the first thing I thought of. But do you even call it like a sycamore tree or something?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that scary tree is, by the way. I don't know.
Like I was thinking, Stanford is a tree. That's not into the S, but they don't walk around in their games either.
Right. But Stanford Cardinal, that's their logo, mascot, whatever they want to call it, right? Tulane. Tulane is the green wave.
It's a wave, right? I know that. Yeah, right. Not waves, just wave.
Tulsa is oddly the Golden Hurricane. There's never been a hurricane in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but for some reason they're the Golden Hurricane.
Oh, see, I wouldn't have known that at all.
Yeah, that one's a little. That's why I was saying that with Notre Dame and okay, here if Notre Dame's big, here's another big one, Alabama.
Oh yeah, Roll Tide.
Crimson Tide.
Well, yeah, that's right.
And then you have a bunch up in the Northeast, like the Harvard Crimson and I think Brown is Brown or something like that, which is odd, but they're smarter than me, so I can't figure it out. Okay, Fanger, we're 5 minutes in and people are like, that's awesome. What does this have to do with our today's guest? It does though, right? Remember, because Golden Flash, that's why I thought about this. Kent State is one of those part of the trivia questions. So Nate, again, thank you for being here today. Thank you for letting me have a trivia question with you. I got to start coming up with trivia questions for guests. That'll be a lot of fun. It'll,
Yeah,
it'll
you
be
do.
it'll be stuff that I have no idea about. So I'll just be wrong all the time. But Nate, so what we wanted to talk about today. First of all, let's openly, publicly give you your flowers, your due, your praise. Congratulations, man! You have just recently been named the director of track and field at Kent State. That's no small thing because you're following. I'll say a legend. I'll have to tell the story in today's podcast of how Bill Lawson changed my life coaching wise, and then therefore the rest of my life. So you're following not a small guy here. And now you're the director. You're the big man. No longer just, that's air quotes, the throws coach. You're capital T, capital H, capital E. You're the coach. How's it feel to finally be in the I don't want to say the big boy chair, but the bigger chair?
That's a big boy chair. You know what? I guess as awkward as it sounds, I guess it's exciting because I get my own direction. So, being a throws coach, we know what kind of we want to do or how we would proceed, but you don't necessarily have that power to proceed as being an assistant coach. So you just kind of tuck things down in your gut, you tuck things down away, but having the ability to now create your own staff, do your own thing, have your meets. I think that empowers you a little bit more. I don't know if I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. It's not like I grew up wanting to be a track and field coach or even a head coach. So it's like, oh, here's the next step. Let's go win the next 20 conference champions in a row. And, the goal is to be top 25 in the country type thing. So
I love it. Well, let's put a pin in that because I love to explore it always whenever someone becomes a first-time head coach, which I actually don't know. I'm guessing that's for you. We'll find out here in a little bit. But also, I think something unique here, and it probably shouldn't be unique in my opinion. I do want to explore as we go through the journey what it's like for a throws coach to be a head coach. And I say that because I could probably name about 10 off the top of my head, but not 100. But I also know throws coaches pretty intimately as far as resourcefulness, coaching wise, time management. I mean, I just don't know how you can be a throws coach with the different types of events and quantities of numbers of athletes that you typically have and not have some really strong head coaching positives already built into you. So I want to explore that as we get to it, but let's kind of kick back. You talked about, the goal was never maybe even to be a track coach or maybe even be a director. Where does, at some point coaching, if you were an athlete, went from something that happens to you, a coach would pour into you as an athlete, and somewhere in your mind at some point it had to flip and be like, oh, wait a minute, I actually could be like this could be my profession. I don't have to be an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer. I actually could be a track coach. Where does coaching come into you in your life?
That goes way back to be 100% honest with you. There's not a lot of me's. Like when I was 12 years old, I decided that's what I want to do is go to the Olympics. So this has been this. I have a 12-year-old now, and he's very athletic. He does his thing, but no one in my family at 12, 15, and 17 has decided this is what they were going to do. At 12 years old, I knew I was going to the Olympics. I had my goal set. I was going to throw the discus. It was my whole. So I've been in this mentally for a long time. And then you get to a point. When I was in high school, I'm from Montana, by the way, and you would think Montana didn't have a very big high school, but I ended up going to a bigger high school my junior and senior year, and they had like 34 guy throwers, and my throws coach would take 17 and go throw the shot put. He would give me the 17, and so I was coaching the 17 other discus throwers. So we kind of split half and half, and I would help out the discus throwers while he was down the shot put, and then he would come back, and then he would help me after practice got kind of wound down, and there wasn't too many people out there. Then he would coach me. So I was coaching in high school already a little bit, and then I got to college, and I would just kind of help out. And then, so I've been coaching, honestly, myself or somebody else from when I was super young. It just kind of was instilled in me. And my dad was a teacher. My mom was a teacher. My sister's a teacher. My grandpa was a professor. we come from a family of kind of teaching anyway. So I don't know if it's just part of who I was as I grew up or who I am.
So it maybe isn't the most uncommon thing to hear about kind of that player slash coach, but it might be uncommon that it was a 14, 15, 16, 17 year old, a high schooler. And you said really early, 12 years old, you're like, oh yeah, I'm like, this is my mission. I'm going to the Olympics in the discus, by the way.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon for a 12-year-old to say, I'm going to go to the NFL or, Major League Baseball, but rarely, unfortunately, do we have the kid that says, oh yeah, in the discus, that's where I'm going. Right.
Mhm.
How did you get to that point though? Because you didn't just, as a 12-year-old and coach looked at you and said, oh yeah, you're basically my assistant coach, and then I'll help you after. How did that evolve to where you were kind of this student athlete coach as a high schooler?
Well, I guess my dad well, I guess was because he retired, but he was a junior high track and field coach. And so, in junior high, sixth, seventh grade, they would have us try the mile and the high jump and the pole vault and this, all these different events that you're trying because they don't know where they're going to put you because you're young and you're developing. But my dad was a throws coach, so he would coach the shot put, and then we had another discus coach. But I was like, no joke, when I was in eighth grade, I wrestled in seventh grade. I wrestled 98 pounds, and in eighth grade, I wrestled at 105. So I was tiny. So I liked being aggressive. I was an angry kid. I had a lot of frustration as a kid. So the throwing events actually fit me fairly well. I could get a little bit aggressive, let that out, but I sucked in the shot put because I was 100 pounds, right? Soaking wet. Discus, though, you can get away with being kind of technical and long and more of a smooth event. If you can kind of smooth those techniques out, you can get away with throwing relatively far or further, and not having to have that muscle tissue behind you, the shot. So I always found myself over in the discus ring a lot, and it was fun having those coaches kind of help me out. I had I had a junior high, or a church right beside our junior high, that I ended up throwing a discus right through their church window at one time. And just small memories that you keep when you were like a young kid. And then, I'm getting a John Powell discus video, and I would watch that like a 30-minute thing. I'd probably watch it 2 or 3 times a night. So I was 13, 14 years old, and I just put it on repeat and repeat, and rewind, and just kind of dig in all this stuff. And I had the Mac Wilkins discus video. And being in Montana, I guess I didn't have a ton to do. So when you're kind of bored, well, you found something to do. Let's just do the best you could do at it. And that just tended to be athletics / discus.
I love that dedication of watching the film, because back then, we're not that old, but we certainly didn't have YouTube back then. So we were watching those videos over and over and over and over and over and over
Yeah,
again. You
exactly.
mentioned you mentioned mom, dad, cousins, brother, everybody was a teacher. As you were going through high school and started looking towards the college side, was it kind of like, I'm going to be a teacher, or what did you think about career-wise at this point?
Yeah. So that's the other, and eventually we'll get into reptiles. But the other part of it, I'm artistic. So even as a coach right now, I mean, obviously we coach the physicality aspect of it. We have to know the central nervous system. You have to know the muscular system. You have to know how to develop an athlete. But I really see it as an artistic side as well. So there's an art flow, there's energy flow, there's movement flow. So when I was in high school, I did a lot of art stuff. I majored. I did AP art. I went into college wanting to be a freelance artist. I was going to draw for medical books. It was kind of my back of my head, go to the Olympics and draw for books. And then as you're kind of in the college system, you kind of like, well, art's not going to necessarily cut it. So I went to art education, and then I was like, well, and I started off actually my first year of college was at University of Arizona. So, but I ended up transferring here after Mike Maynard was my coach, and I transferred up here after my first year because of finances. And then I kind of just worked my way from art education and ended up doing education, like a social studies comprehensive thing. Like I could do geology, geography, psychology. It was kind of all comprehensive type thing. So yeah, I ended up doing education, even though that wasn't my initial thought. We'll say
You,
that.
you probably wouldn't believe this, but you're the second person that I know. I know someone who does that, who draws for medical books.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, she's in our small group for church. And I always thought it was fast because I never thought about like, oh yeah, someone has to do that, and someone has to do that really well, by the way, because it has to be, anatomically correct and all that kind of stuff. And but I was like, well, what a niche job. Like this all she does is she draws all these different things for here at University of Illinois for medical books and such. So I never thought I'd meet another person who was like, oh yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah, no, and I knew when I was a very young age. It's funny you talk about your church group, because that's where I just kind of like, hey, where does God directed me? And I loved art, so it was like, hey, I love the anatomy of the hand or the leg, or just all the details of the muscular and structural system. And so I like that fine detail work. It didn't really pan out as far as drawing stuff later on in life, but that's where my kind of reptiles, that the artistic side of me is. I love the color and the aspects of what I have downstairs in my basement, which is still, it's a huge part of who I am as well. So
I love that side. I came up through coaching sprints, hurdles, and jumps, but early on, I mean, maybe the first college real job I had at Troy University, I found myself going to practice early just to watch the hammer throwers specifically. I love the shot and the discus and the jab, but those seem more, I'm going to say violent, especially shot, like, it's just one big push, and then even javelin run, and it's just, stopping and trying to think everything into it. But the hammer seemed more, that might be the right word for me to describe it as well, as artistic. It feels like, oh, it's a dance. It's like a ballet in this really small circle, by the way.
right.
And you do these amazing circle, turns. And then there's a little bit, I know it's probably more violent than I'm going to say, but then there's like this little violence at the end to, actually release the hammer. And then it goes so stinking far. And every stop I've ever had, Ball State, Mississippi, I just love watching the hammer. And it's just fascinating to me. I love that event. You mentioned you went to Arizona. So I'm going to assume you got bigger than 105 pounds to go throw the discus at Arizona under the great Mike Maynard, by the way. I mean, it's not like no slouch of a coach here picked you up. How did that progression go? And as to Arizona with Mike?
It was good. So every year, when you're a young kid, you got to try to put on that weight. It's going to come no matter what. But that's part of the goal. Like liking the weight room or not, or liking to eat or not. So I was 115 pounds as a freshman, and then 130 as a sophomore, like 170 or 180 as a senior. Then went to Arizona and got up to, well, probably by the time I got there, I was around like 190. I got up to about 205. And then I think probably 205 that first year, where I redshirted at University of Arizona, which was an awesome year. It came down to Dominic Johnson was a pole vaulter, and he ended up going 18-8 that year. And they were going to kind of give me some scholarship, but I think they ended up giving him pretty much the full scholarship. And I totally get it at 18-8. And he was going to the Olympics that year, I think, in 96. I totally got it. So it was kind of like, well, shoot, do I financial burden that? And Maynard was awesome. He really helped out. And Dave Loschenkall was there, who knew the Pagels. And the Pagels had just taken a position up here at Kent State, and Ramona was the American record holder in shot put. So through that kind of networking, I was able to get in contact with them. And Blue Trick had called me. He was down in North Carolina as well. So Brian was down in North Carolina, and I knew him slightly, and I was told the Pagels were up here. So it was kind of between, in my head, kind of like that, Blue Trick down North Carolina or Kent State. And I just thought in my head, like, hey, Ramona's wasn't a very big person, and I'm not a very big person. So they kind of understand that smaller side of the technical framework. So I came up here in 96. So I was an athlete here, 97, 98, 99, and 2000.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point you brought up there. I just had a conversation with a coach, and we were talking about every coach's favorite subject right now, the portal. And
right.
he was lamenting about it, but also he, admittedly said, well, I'm also gaining from it as well. And this is I don't want to give away too much. But so what, I get a lot of inside secrets, and I'm blessed by that. So I don't give away any inside secrets. But what we were talking about was some of the kids that were transferring, they not only in and out for this coach, but he was talking about, some of these kids were on 50% scholarships, and now they're going somewhere where they can get a full or 90. And he was like, I can't hardly fault them for that. I don't want to saddle a kid with student debt and things like that. So I like that topic about, Arizona and finances. And it's like, okay, they had another teammate who did really, really well. So I kind of get it, but you know what? I don't want to be saddled with a bunch of student debt either. So where can I go? Because at the end of the day, how many of us are going anywhere in our athleticism for track and field, any sport, by the way, that's going to go make money. So get that education and get it with as little debt as possible. I think that's a bigger subject that maybe we don't really talk about a lot of times.
No, sure. I get that as well. I mean, you have to have that's kind of the hard aspect of track and field. You got to understand that athletes are not only athletes, they're people, they're humans. They're going to have, like you say, debt that they're going to have at the end of their college career, and they're not going to be going to the Olympics. And even if they went to the Olympics don't even pay really that much. I mean, It just depends upon it's a heart and passion issue. Like, depends upon where they want to fit in, where they feel like they need to be. So I mean, that to me is on a personal level. So I have no problem with the transfer portal for the most part out there. I mean, they've got to be where they fit best and suits them.
Yeah, and especially in track and field, I have a little less. Um, I'm a little less concerned about our football and basketball players because they're all on full rides. But when we only get 12 and a half ish for the men and 18, which 18 seems like a lot, but it only seems like a lot because you're comparing it to the men who are at 12.6. I mean, 18 is, we're talking about, what is it, 82 for football, and it's 15 I think for basketball, and the roster size of like 12. They don't give out all their full rides for I'm sure I got those numbers mixed up, but it's a farce when it comes to what our sport is and the scholarship level that supports it. So it's hard for me on the outside. Now again, I'm not coaching anymore, so I also it's way easier for me to go, yeah, sorry, Fanger, that kid transferred, but they're going to get a full ride. And it's like, yeah, but man, I was banking on that kid. So it's my job, man. So I get it. So you go to Kent State. Now, you don't seem to have a problem. You went from Montana to Arizona. That's a big distance. And obviously in Montana and around that area, there were some probably great options for you for school and for throwing. And now you go all the way out to the Midwest. So you don't seem to have a problem going away from home and being kind of on your own and establishing your own roots.
No. I mean, it's not like I didn't like my family and my parents, but I mean, listen, I'm my own person. This is the way I am to this day, even with my family. Like, I am who I am. Like, I'm not tied in or down anywhere. It doesn't feel like, I mean, essentially and you had mentioned like a home Bible group, but that's a big thing. And maybe we'll get into that later, but that's essentially in who I am. Like, Christ can lead and direct and where he wants me to go. And I felt like I was called down to University of Arizona because Maynard, and I like that warm weather atmosphere, the ability to be able to train outside year round. And then, you know what, things didn't quite pan out there, but obviously if you kind of understand how God works in his sovereignty, he puts you in a situation because he's going to move you to a different situation. So Lawson Call hooked me up with the Pagos up at Kent State. And this is where he's essentially had me make home for the last 26 years. So yeah, I have no problem jumping around, that's for sure.
Which that's in its rarity too, right? I mean, I was just talking with Marlon Brink, our guest last week, about he's from Wayne State, Nebraska, and he's been at that institution for I think he's going on his 23rd season is what we talked about. And, that's a rarity. Of coaches that are staying at one place. And I'm not, by the way, no judgment. Like, if you're, because by the way, 10-year career for coaching college, and I went to 5 different places. So I can't say anything about anybody jumping around. In fact, if you listen to Blue Schexnader's episode here on the podcast, he talks about, hey, we pay our coaches so little. If you can go somewhere, especially early in your career, that makes more money, go. You got to take care of yourself for one day to retire and take care of your family and things like that. So no judgment at that. But you went to Kent State. And so is this where the story ends? Like, you went to undergrad and then you became an assistant and now the director? What's this? Is that it? All right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast here today. This is our shortest one ever.
Yes. Okay, that's it.
But so that may be the story. And I love that story, and to explore why, because obviously, and it could be, God's plan. It could have been your plan. It could have been plans that you thought were going to go on, but obviously you chose to stay as well. You're definitely not stuck at Kent State. You're choosing to be at Kent State. So what was it coming from undergrad? How did there's a very common way to go somewhere else is you graduate. So you go maybe be a GA or go somewhere else. How did you stay at Kent State after your undergrads?
Well, I graduated, and I hadn't actually graduated. I pushed back my student teaching because I was not going to student teach and do my senior year, my that spring. So I said, listen, I'll student teach that fall. So I came back and I student taught from the fall of 2000 into 2021. But they had things went down kind of weird here. Rainbow had ended up going to Wichita State, and a big crew had followed him. John Wise went down there. Wendell McCraven, who was the distance coach, ended up staying, got the head position up here. And I was still here doing my student teaching. He was interviewing for throws coaches while I was still training. And I wasn't even, honestly, listen, dude, I wasn't thinking of being a throws coach. I was going to get my teaching degree. Then I was going to go back to Montana, work with my strength coach, get stronger, boom, go to the Olympics. That was my goal. I was right around 195 feet. If I put on some strength, do I get to 205 or 210? Where does that lead me? And, it ended up being like Wendell had interviewed some good candidates like Lisa Mitsapika, who was really good. He brought in probably 3 or 4 people, and no one had ended up taking the position. So I don't know if it was probably like October or November. And he was like, hey, Fanger, would you ever thought about being a throws coach? And I was like, I don't know. You want me to be your throws coach? He's like, sure. You want to do your interview? I was like, sure, whatever. So I stepped in his office for 15 minutes. He's like, oh, okay, you're my throws coach. I'm like, all right, awesome. That's all I remember. My resume was like, worked at McDonald's, went to track and field camp. I mean, dude, it was so sad.
Your resume was, I'm here. There you go. What else do we got to do here, Wendell?
Right. Like, well, yeah, I have no resume. I'm out of college.
So what year was that? Because I was at Ball State 02 and 03 seasons. Yeah, 02 and 03. I thought Wendell definitely was the head coach during that time. Maybe Bolt was the coach for the first year, but Wendell's the only one I remember being at Kent State. Were you at Kent State when I was at Ball State?
So I was here again in 2000, in that summer, 2000 summer, that it split up. Like Rainbow was out, Wendell got the job. I got the job, but I couldn't get officially hired until I actually graduated. So I graduated that December. So in the fall, I was doing my student teaching from September to December. So I actually was officially on the payroll starting December. It would have been January 2001.
Yeah, okay.
But they didn't really actually pay me. I didn't find out until like August of that year. It was just like a stipend type thing. So I officially was hired August 1st, 2021.
Wow.
Yeah. No, 2001. Yeah. But I was there, but I never really skipped a beat because, I was an athlete from 97, 98, 99, 2000. Then I was coaching 2000 all the way up. I was years as an athlete, then boom, straight as a coach. So
yeah, that, speaking of the hammer, like I talked about, that was amazing, right? We had Zach Riley and Dale Cowper, and I mean, just 2 guys in the MAC conference battling out. You saw like a mini preview of nationals at our conference meet, because those 2 guys would go to nationals and did really well. It was such a fun time, and really taught me about the MAC conference. You can say all you want about Power 5 and then the rest of the 5 or whatever, G5, whatever they call them, that MAC conference. And I don't even want to say, I used to say especially in the throws, but it is kind of all across jump sprints, right? You name it, distance, etc. But during that time, I just remember the throws being really strong and having some really good throws coaches in that conference during that time.
Yeah. And there's still a lot here. It gets a good battle spot. That's for sure. There's no question.
Absolutely. So you become the assistant coach. What happens to the training aspect for you? That was a pretty big part of your goal set. Did that go away because coaching takes 400 hours a week? Or how did you kind of help or try to balance the 2?
Well, so when I graduated, I still wanted to be top tier level athlete, but you get to a point, honestly, where you've probably maximized that side of your body. I was 22 or 23 years old, but it was a good transition. It was a weird transition, but I ended up transitioning. I don't know quite how it happened, but I transitioned to the javelin for a little bit. I actually picked up a javelin and threw it for. Now I don't even know. I don't even want to call it competitive for 2 or 3 years, but it was a stage where, like, all right, listen, I'm not a big guy. Like, if I wasn't in the weight room, I was probably at 230, 225 to 230. And if I wasn't in the weight room for a week or 2, I'd drop down to 215 to 210. It was just like, I couldn't actually hold strength. It sucked. That's why you don't see me. You didn't see me on any big stage by any stretch. But the javelin was still something where, technically you got to wrap your mind around it, and it was something I enjoyed. It was still a throwing event, but it wasn't something I had done. But picking up for a year or two was perfect for me because Dorf Hensendorf he was our javelin thrower here, which is a stud. One of my best friends down at Wichita State, and he helped me kind of like, hey, this is what you kind of need to do. I would send film down down south every once in a while to some of the coaches down there, like, hey, give me an eye. What do you think of this? And that actually was a big aspect of me. I knew the shot put well. I knew the discus well. Hammer I had thrown when I was in college, like 190, 191. So I knew it, but I didn't, it was a whole growth aspect of it with John Smith and Judd Logan and those guys kind of mentoring me through that position point. But the javelin, I had no clue. So throwing it myself competitively for a year or two was perfect. Exactly what I needed as far as getting me into that coaching aspect as well. So I didn't think of it as going to take me into a coaching aspect. I just wanted to do it competitively. But yeah, I ended up blowing out my shoulder and getting some cortisone in that after 2 years. It was like, you can't really transition from a muscular event, which is more discus shot oriented, into the javelin, even though I enjoyed it for a hot minute.
There's your
good training mechanism for myself.
There's your PSA right there. You notice he said, okay, so I had to get some cortisone. Like that was maybe not the great health wise there on the shoulder. That brings up a great point. I don't believe I once had someone tell me they were a volleyball coach, and she told me because she had done the events. I was a absolutely terrible hurdler in high school, a tad bit better, whatever terrible is, whatever just a tad bit better is half miler. I was garbage. I was just there was nothing. Genetically, I was bankrupt. Coaching, I was bankrupt. Probably motivation, I was just above bankrupt. But I was able to take that passion of track and field and have a lot of great mentors and coaching education and became an okay coach. She tried to tell me because I didn't do the events that I couldn't be a good coach, because she did the events that she would be better. Now, obviously that's a farce, right? There, you're thinking right now of 100 coaches that never did an event that coach it out of this wazoo, man. They're just amazing, right? What do you recommend? You talked about that helped you throwing the javelin, which I can see where it would help. I don't think it would not help, right? But there's going to be plenty of coaches, and not specifically the throws here, but because we have a throws coach, we'll take that as the example. What's your recommendation for a coach who, let's do the reverse. Let's say you got a throws coach, a guy or gal who wants to be a throws coach and was a really, they don't have to be good. They were a javelin thrower. Mm-hmm. And now they're responsible for coaching the shot, the disc, the hammer, and of course the jab. What's your recommendation for someone who never threw the shot, the hammer, the disc, to be able to coach it?
That is such a loaded question though, because you have right-minded people and you have left-minded people. You have the mathematics and you have the artistic.
I was about to say, this is the artistic side coming out. Perfect. Okay.
This is 100% me as an artist. Like I need, even as I write my lifting workouts or as I administer, hey, you're going to throw a heavy ball, then a light ball, whatever you're going to do, right? I need to know how that feels within my head and in my body before I administer it to the athlete. So I know if I'm going to give them the Russian cycle in the weight room, I know how it feels. I know the buriedness of it. I know how they're going to respond on a day-to-day basis. And I know they're going to be pissed off, wore down, but I know what to expect from them. I know if I expect to work on their plant leg, their block leg, how that's going to feel for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. So to me, as a coach, I have to be able to step into their shoes physically. That's a big aspect of who I am in my head and how I'm going to program, because I need to know what the response is to that athlete. Now, that doesn't dictate how that day is going to unfold. If they come out that day and like, hey, how's it going? And the response is, it's okay. I know they either flunked a math test, they broke up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, they didn't get the right food they needed. So that might adjust. Every day is an adjustment to what's going to happen in the rings or in the weight room. And you've got to be on your toes for that adjustment. And you can't take your program and throw it out the window for that day. You still have to have that programmability, but you lessen the numbers, you increase the numbers. Everything's slightly different. But for me as a coach, I have to know primarily how that response is going to come outside of their daily life. How is the response going to come from the weight room or from the throwing aspect of it? But again, that's my artistic side of it. You can really be a good coach in knowing the number side of it. I know people who have everything calculated down to if they throw this ball, this number, this many throws this day, and this, but they have everything precisely down on a computer and graphed out and everything else. I'm like, I am so anti-graph, anti-number, anti-every, but that's just who I am as a coach, right? You can find really good success in my side of coaching or really good success in their side of coaching. So everyone comes at coaching slightly differently and how they process. It's all processing. It's all cognitive processing and how you think about it and how it kind of flows out that body. To me, it's all about energy. How do I position even in positioning, even technique in and of itself, positions are only there to establish energy flows, and the energy has to flow in certain mechanisms so it goes out through the implement. And if it's not, you don't get the proper energy into the implement, it's still not going to go far, no matter how well the positions are created or not created. So everything comes down to energy flow and how the athlete can move their body.
I think you really hit something on the head there. Like, in fact, if you're listening, like, hit the rewind button about 3 times and listen to that. What you said there, Nate, was I'm going to say it in a slightly different way. Make sure you correct me if I'm misunderstanding it. You talked about coaching the person, not just the event. Like, you're not coaching robots. I thought your point about when a kid comes in and they're like, yeah, today's okay or whatever, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this kid's on a little bit of a down where you flunked a test, girlfriend, boyfriend broke up with them, Mrs. Mom, that's not that's not uncommon, right? Mrs. Family. I'm probably not going to get the A+ workout that I wrote up. However, we need to still get the right things going today. So maybe we lighten the weight load in the weight room. Maybe we take off a rep or 2 outside on track. You're coaching the person. Do you do? So I think that's extremely important. Do you do the opposite? And what I mean by that is, kid comes to you for practice and he or she is bouncing like they are on cloud 9. They passed a test. Mom or dad slipped them an extra, I almost said a 20, but in 2022, that's probably not a lot of money. Slipped them an extra $100 Venmo. The cute boy or cute girl, talk to them, whatever. Do you ever add a rep or add weight in that case?
Yes, 100%. And the other thing, again, so if we're going to go down that line, like I try to, so in the world of throws, I'm probably going to try to get anywhere between 22 to 30 throws a day. But if I know or sometimes down to 10 if they're really beat down. But if I know they've got a ton of energy and they're on like throw 22 and I'm like, hey, what number are you on? They're like, I think I'm like 20 or 22 in. I'm like, well, you've got 15 more to go now. They're like, what? Like, yeah, you've got the energy and you continue to produce. And there's no reason why we don't get that production today, because you might not get it tomorrow. So let's continue to push into that production. And I mean, on that same point in the weight room, like an unpredicted max day. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, but there's no reason why, if you're feeling froggy and we're doing doubles and triples and they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to max out today. Throw on a single and see where you're going, because you've got a ton of pop, you've got a ton of energy, and just go get it done. Sometimes trying to calculate that out doesn't necessarily work out calculation wise, but if you're feeling it today, do it. Like, I'm not going to max you out necessarily on 8 6s in 5 days. That's more volume, more hypertrophy, more build the body up. But on a day where you're feeling poppy and you're doing doubles and triples, heck, dude, if you feel like you're maxing out, it doesn't happen all the time, but you got to go with the feel, good or bad.
So on that artistic side, the coaching art side, how do you sell that to? This is the closest we have ever gotten to X's and O's. So I'm walking a fine line with you, my friend. I told you I always have the most fun with throws coaches. So we're getting too close, in my opinion. But but it's my show, so I write the rules. How do you sell that to the athlete? We're dealing with, in your area, 18 to 22-year-olds. When you add work to someone, it's a punishment. It's like, oh, well, go do more of that. Here you're adding work to them, but it's actually not a punishment. It's actually an attaboy. Like, you're doing so well, like everything's flowing. Let's get more of the good stuff going while we can. How do you, on the art side, get that kid to believe into that? Like, oh, coach isn't mad at me. I'm doing more because he's mad at me. When in the opposite is actually true. How do you sell that to the kid?
Again, so yeah, we can back off the X's and O's and talk about either the recruiting aspect of it or who you're getting as an athlete aspect of it. Like, so if you're going to recruit the kid, listen, the longer I am in this job, the best and the most advantageous way to recruit yourself is to negative recruit yourself. To say, listen, you're coming in and you're going to get your butt handed to you on a day-to-day basis. You're going to not be a very big fish. you're going to learn how to like come in with seniors and juniors that are kicking your butt, having better numbers and reps than you are. So you've got to live through the grind for a long time and establish yourself. And if you aren't hungry and passionate about being kicked to the curb for a little bit, then you probably shouldn't be here. Because the fact of the matter is, I mean, this is the way I say it. It's, I guess, my vernacular, but track and field is a bastard sport, and the throwers are a bastard child within the bastard sport. So it's not like we're even cared about a whole ton, which is fine. I've got no problem with it. That's kind of what I feed off anyway. I like feeding off like, hey, no one's looking or no one's caring. Let's just go kick some butt. But they've got to like that attitude as well. How much pain can I suffer through to make myself better? How good do I want to be? What's the process of this thing? Is it the process, or is it at the end of the day, I want to be a 200 footer, but do you want to work every second of every day to be that 200 footer? And it's the attitude, who you recruit essentially. And it doesn't have to be necessarily, sometimes I'm not looking for the best number, call out of high school, but I got to have a kid who, when I get on the phone with, are telling me about what they're doing in the weight room and telling me who they're watching film wise and what are they doing and how do I get better. Now, there's some athleticism to that, because you can be a hungry athlete, but if you don't have talent, you're not going to get very far. God's only giving you so much ability. So how much does that ability and hunger and passion work together? That's who you're going to find. So if we're in that scenario where I'm telling you you're going to do more that day and they're not excited about it, then I probably don't have the right person.
So you kind of look at it like, oh, maybe I didn't do my homework right, or whatever circumstances. Like I like.
Yeah. And I still have kids like that in your program. And it's not like, maybe when I was a younger coach, I'd get pissed off like, oh man, I want everybody to have this hunger. But I'm me. So I have a hunger and passion every day. I wake up all hungry. Now, I can't necessarily drive your hunger and your desire. So you kind of, nowadays, I would say I psychologically coach 90% of the time and physically coach 10% of the time. It's how the relationships build and how you understand your kids and your athletes and how you're going to give them and administer the workouts that day, because you know who they are. So it's building a relationship. I am more of a psychological coach and can benefit getting more out of the kid than I can just trying to like plug in numbers and say, hey, well, this was your rep scheme today in the weight room and you didn't get it done, so you're going to get worse. No, well, you didn't get it done quite the way you want to, but tomorrow let's transition and get some other stuff out of you. Like, everyone's a little different. I call them, you don't want to be a cookie cutter coach. You don't want to have a mindset of this is the way you need to coach and this is the only way you need to coach. Every kid you coach is going to be different. So you're coaching every different kid slightly differently, right? Everybody has to come to a different terms in their head on how they approach things. But again, I'm one throws coach out there, so I have, say, 20 kids out there. Not at one time, they kind of come through different times of the day, but you still have to have a singularity within the throws program. What are we after as a group? And then within that singularity, I can still branch off and still create different individuals, variety. Some people I'm trying to win a national championship. Some people I'm trying to get to my own conference championship, because can you even make the 30 squad roster? I don't know. So everyone's got a different place.
Yeah, I think coaching for sure is the art and science, right? Because if it was fully one way or the other, if it was all art, it'd be one way. If it was all science, well, then what do we actually need to coach for? You could just write up a workout on the tablet and have the kid go to the track or the weight room by themselves. And what are you really doing here, right? As a coach. So I love that aspect. Explore that a little bit more. Help me understand. You talk about you're coaching 90% more psychologically, 10% physical. I think I might have switched one of your words up there. Where does that come from? You mentioned some mentors earlier that we didn't delve into that I'd love to. You mentioned, Judd Logan. You mentioned the Pagels, John Smith. Yeah. John, of course. Did you pick up that from guys and gals like them? Or was this something earlier because of the bend of artistic for you as a younger kid?
I'm going to say the artistic side. Here's what helped me to be the best throws coach, to be 100% honest with you. God has given me only so much athletic ability. And so I had to work my flipping butt off to do what I did to throw 195 feet. I'm 5'10". I'm 220 pounds. I don't deserve to be in the ring, to be honest with you, with some of the competitors that I was in. So I had to do everything I needed to do to learn position. So all the film that I watched, everybody I watched, I would watch people. And you don't just watch the small people, you end up watching the big people, and you see the nuances and how they come out of the back of the ring and how they strike, and are they using the left leg or right leg? And you watch it so many times that you end up being a student of the sport. And it's kind of what I push to my athletes. You got to be a student of the sport. You wake up every morning, you got to watch some film, get an idea of what you're doing that day, go do some drills. If you're only doing what I'm giving to you at practice, then you're only going to be so good. You need to have more. You need to take it home with you. So that's the physical aspect of it, knowing kind of how to throw. But again, the psychological aspect of it is trying to convince the kids. And that's not trying to convince the kids, but it's keeping their passions going. So if I'm in a heavy cycle in the weight room, like the Russian cycle, really tears their body down. They get super tired mentally in the fall. They're trying to do their catch up on their studies, their work, while they're tired, while they're trying to get technique done. Psychologically, you really have to drag them out of the mud every day. So essentially, I'm kind of their big, like, hey guys, we can do this. I get it. You're tired, but let's continue to do this. So the coaching aspect of it, I know I can write a program, and I've been consistent with it for the last 20 years. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. You do add little nuances, 5 or 10%. You always change up here and there. So you keep things fresh. And so the athletes don't know they're doing the same thing like day to day or year to year. You want to keep things fresh for them. But the biggest aspect of it as a coach is go out there and be their cheerleader, or you know what, even not just their cheerleader. Sometimes you got to be their dad. I call it surrogate parenting. So when I recruit you, I tell their parent, like, listen, I'm a surrogate parent. They're leaving you and they're coming to me. So I have them now for the next 4 or 5 years, and they're under my care, under my tutelage, and they are like my children. And sometimes the dad has to be really harsh and put their foot down and say, hey, listen, you're screwing up, you're pissing me off, and you need to learn the hard way. And that resonates. I think they need that discipline sometimes, and it gets them out of some funks, or they kind of have to learn a little lesson in life, because not everyone's coming in here, necessarily is passionate every single day or wanting to go to the Olympics. You got to have a little parenting involved in there as well. So there's parenting, there's cheerleading, there's, writing programs, there's learning artistic flow. The coaching side of it has a big aspect of it. And I think younger coaches, when I was a younger coach, it would be 90% that programming aspect and 10% psychological, right? I was your cheerleader 10% of the time, but doggone it, if you didn't listen to my programming, you're pissing me off and you're screwing up. It is 20 years into the show. It is totally reversed. Here's what I've got. If you don't want to do it, you're probably not going to get very good, but I get it because you're being an idiot today. But I'm trying to psychologically bring you back around to that. And I think that's where some of the best coaching comes from, not necessarily the numbers on paper, but how that relationship works.
So how do we, I love that. I mean, bingo. And here's where you can bring value from your experience. You just said early in my career, the 90-10 was probably physical versus psychological. And now 20 years on, it's flipped 180. It's completely opposite. So you had to have gone through ups and downs, athletes that challenged you, personal aspects of the coaching that challenged you to do that. It didn't just one day, on your 10th anniversary of coaching, it didn't just flip. Like it went from 90-10 to 80-20 to 70-30, probably didn't go that linear either, by the way. There, we know the truth of ups and downs. So help someone out right now. There is a coach listening and they're in their 3rd year coaching, and there's 2 coaches. We're going to give 2 scenarios. There's a coach listening right now. They're in their 3rd year and they think they got it down. Like they're kind of listening to you like, really, it took you 20 years, man. I'm in my 3rd year and I got this thing down pat. I'm the greatest coach. And I'm about to coach 1 million Olympians. And then there's another coach out there right now that's in their 3rd year going, okay, I believe this. So how do I not wait until my 20th year, Fanger? How do I learn this now in my 3rd, 4th, 5th year? What advice can you give to young coaches? And I don't know that this is a throws advice here, even though we got the throws coach. I think this is a coaching advice. How can we help accelerate young coaches into this, what I believe is the proper mindset of coaching young people 18 to 22 years old?
Well, okay. Unfortunately, I'm going to say it like this. You're going to have to continue. And it isn't like you said, it doesn't go from 90-10 and all of a sudden just switch. There is a natural progress, and the progression comes from you as a human being learning how to deal with other human beings. So
hold on, Fanger. Now everybody wanted you to give some kind of magic pill And, you're going to have to get that athlete that struggles to learn the hammer because they never did it in high school. You just said something that's really challenging. You said you're going to have to, it's on you. You're going to have to develop as the coach.
Yeah. It's not the athlete, it's you as a human being. It's how you process, it's how you cognitively process the ability to coach. It comes down to it, because when I was young and you have to program, what you're trying to prove to the athletes and trying to prove to yourself, which takes years. And this is the hardest part to understand. And the years, man, the years of doing that programming have to lend to successful athletes. So if you have MAC champions, if you have continually national qualifiers, if you have kids in the top on the platform of the NCAA championships, then you're doing something right. That's the programming aspect of it. Because the reality is this: you could be a third-year coach right now. If I'm talking to you as a third-year coach and you think you have it down, ask yourself, how many people did you put on the podium at the NCAAs? Because if you didn't put one, you don't have it down. If you didn't put a national champion out there, you don't have it down. And the person that is questioning themselves, that's a good question to have. How were you successful as a coach? Now, everyone's different. Maybe somebody wanted to be a conference champion and not a national champion. Well, that's fine. You find out your own level as a person, who you want to be. If I don't have somebody standing on that national championship stage, I didn't do my job. So the first aspect of it is being able to understand how to get the athletes there through a programming system. That's where the early years, you better be talking to Don Babbitt. You better be talking to the Pagels. You better be talking to John Smith. You better be talking to every mentor that you can think of. And, unfortunately, like the Judd Logans, how do you program your system? Now, just because it came from them doesn't mean it fits you. Like, I've learned as I'm watching, as I'm sit there and asking questions, I'm like, well, I'm glad I'm asking these questions, because that really did well with that program and the way you coach the person, but it would never fly with me. It would never sit well with the way I program, just because it's who I am and the artistic flow of it. So I've learned just as much of talking to them about what not to do for me as about what to do for me. So those first, again, 5 or 6 years is take some time to develop who you are as a programmer. And a lot of that comes down to this. I've been talking to my young assistant coaches, and I'm excited to be a head coach, because I can actually work into being with my assistant coaches as much as my athletes, like really trying to make better assistant coaches. But a lot of it is like, hey, if you want to know how to play with an athlete, get a walk-on kid that might be good, might not be good, but then that's your test dummy. Hey, what am I going to do here? I'm throwing different ideas out. Did it stick? Did it work? Did it not work? You don't want to break them by any stretch, but are they going really well that day? Are they not doing well? Us as coaches really have to play with our own recipes. Is it too much salt? Is it too much pepper? Is it take this out, take that out? So you kind of do. It takes a while to formulate in your head. Are you successful as a coach? Because what stage are you putting them on? And then getting to that part where they're programming well. And then as that happens, okay, now I've got a good program set up, but you as a person now, I don't want to say this to some extent, but you kind of get bored. There's boredom that sets in. So if I do this year after year after year after year, not change anything, sure, I've got a good program, but where's that boredom come in? Where like, okay, well, I didn't change anything. These athletes are killing it. So that's where the psychological aspect of it. So instead of trying to just administer now positioning to them, now I'm befriending them to some extent, or I'm being a dad to them. So now here's the outlay of the plan. How do we work to that, me and you together? That's where that friendship comes in. And I think early on in your career, friendships are hard to have because you're so pinpoint on making that programming right, which is, I get it. It's part of coaching. You need to have that programming right in order to be successful. The older you get, some of the boredom sets in. Psychologically, you can flip things around and you kind of grow as an individual. It's just, it's like, listen, it's like sanctification. You're always working on the process of being a better Christian. You're always working on the process of taking that sin away from yourself and becoming Christ-like follower. And that's no different than in my coaching aspect of it. I'm trying to every day make these kids better. And it had its flows. You start with the mechanics of it and you end up working to the relationship of it. So
I think an important aspect you said there is, you can go to clinics, you can go to camps, you can go to coaching education. And if you've listened to any episodes here, you know that I am a huge proponent of that. Mentors, huge proponent of that. And you mentioned some of the, true legends, specifically in throws, but real legends in our sport. but there's one thing that you can't force, that you can't speed up, you can't compact into a short amount of time, and that's experience. I think it's exactly what I hear you saying is, you're working on your program in years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and to your point, that may be 3 years for one person, it may be 10 years for another. We're all different in how we learn and how we process feedback from our own athletes and programs. As you continue to develop and you gain experience, you see what works, what doesn't work, what different parts of your career's boredom, when that sets in, how do you get, get out of that plateau? It's that experience part that you just can't. I love how you talked about you're so excited now about mentoring into young coaches now that you're a head coach, like you have been with your athletes for many years. You're going to give them so much great leeway and lengthen the leash and experience, but they can't force experience. They're going to need year 1 and year 2, and then year 3, 4, and 5, etc. So I love that. Let's pivot here a little bit to something we were talking about earlier. I tend to think of these things a little bit differently than I think most people, and it maybe sounded like you might be on the same wavelength. And I think it's important for people to hear all sides of it. You were talking about recruiting and the research you're doing on the athletes, and it's not just about the mark. And I think maybe for throws, specifically male throwers, it might be even more important to see physical abilities in regards to, are they 6'2" or 5'10", etc. Just because of the weight going up from high school to college. For women, I always found, not that I recruited a lot of women shot putters, but I'm like, hey, that 4K is going to stay the exact same when you get to our level. So if you throw in 50 feet now, I'm good. Maybe why I'm not in coach anymore. But you talked about during the recruiting process, almost at the interview process, which is what it is, you're looking for certain things. And if someone doesn't have that, and you were talking more like attitude and doggedness and determination, if they don't have it, you're like, it's better that they don't come to you, right? Because you talked about if you come to my program and you aren't ready to be the bastard of the bastard sport, you're going to struggle here, So how do you deal with that mind frame of when a kid says, hey, I'm not coming to your program because of whatever reasons they may actually give you, whatever the reasons might actually be? That's actually I think of that as like a good thing. It's like, oh, if a kid decides I'm not the right coach for them, phew, we both dodge bullets. They're not going to come here and be miserable, and they're not going to come here and make me miserable and make the program. How do you deal with that during recruiting? Because you want them all, right? I mean, if you're attracted to a kid for their marks and personality, you want them, but it may not be the right fit.
Sure. You know what? That's part of the coaching aspect of it. I guess this is where maybe I differ than a lot of different coaches, and I probably, because it's my centrality, it's who I am. I'm, as a Christ follower, I call it my catch-22. I pray for who needs to be in here. Here's the other thing to me, I coach. That's what I do. God's given me the ability to coach. So, but I also consider this my ministry. And I'm not going to shove it down anybody's throat. I don't, Christ never made anybody a Christian, but I am an avenue. I am an avenue for a ministry, essentially. So that's why I think of it. That's kind of a catch-22. Hey, God, if you want them here, cool. If not, whatever. You find who needs to be here, and that's so being able to process on my own in that aspect of it, because there's a lot of kids that I wanted 4 heavy studs last year, and I missed out on every one of them. But you know what? That is what it is. You go on and you say, okay, well, if I miss 4 heavy ones in a row, I guess I need but 2 or 3 building kids, like kids that maybe not have the biggest mark, but eventually you could work with them, and by their junior and senior year, or sophomore, junior, senior year, they're up to the level where they're at conference, winning top 3, or maybe they make the regional meet, or possibly make it the NCAA championships, versus the 4 that I could have had, would have been MAC champions, regional, qualifiers, and on to the NCAAs within that first year. So a lot of it depends upon, again, how things flow. I don't take anything personally. That's by any stretch of your imagination. Nowadays, if you take it personally, oh, they didn't come because of me. Listen, I'm recruiting the Kent State. So it's a two-way street. I'm recruiting you because I want you to be here, but you're recruiting me because you want to be here at Kent State. Do you have the major? Are you willing to go through a lot of work? Are you around your family? There's a lot of different aspects of it. I'm not going to go recruit California, Texas, and Florida, because I'm going to bring them to Kent State, Ohio with 6 inches of snow on the ground all winter long. It is what it is. I've got a field house, but I don't have sunny California weather. So I'm not going to go out and search for them all the time. Now, if they come to me, that's fine. And I've made some good interactions with Jamaica. I've had a Jamaican female on my throw squad probably for the last, I don't know, since Danielle in 2012, so the last 10 years. And I really actually enjoy that aspect of it, is keeping a relationship down there. It's not like I have to have every single Jamaican or every single Ohioan. It's just, you know, you learn at 22 years, like if you get them, cool. If you don't, whatever, move on to the next one. You'll figure out how to have a throws program one way or the other.
You know, this does not diminish what you just said, but you also are in the Midwest. It's hard not to have a good throws program. Well, actually, it is hard because there's so many great throws coaches, but there are so many great
Right.
throwers.
Dude, I get it 100%.
I'm
Yeah.
reminded.
And you know, it's the right fit. Does somebody fit here? Do I fit with them? Do they fit with me? Yeah.
I'm reminded. So I'm a big Christian hip hop fan. That's my 99% of the music I listen to is Lecrae and KB and Andy Mineo and KJ52 and more. The other 1%, by the way, is Vanilla Ice. Just in case you're curious what that other 1% is, it's Rob, it's Vanilla Ice. But there's a line, I believe it's in a Lecrae song. He says, you know, you made me a preacher, but you didn't give me a collar, meaning, you know, the traditional Catholic collar, and that's how you know a priest, yeah, for Catholicism. I'm reminded of that with you when you talk about your faith, and you're like, yeah, you know, I'm like, this is how I minister. I don't have I'm not an official priest or preacher or whatnot, but this is how you show God's love, that and his effect on your life and where you are today.
Right. 100%. Yeah. You got to call it. You're not going to have a throws coach or a head coach or something like that. I mean, like I would put a collar on. No way. He's got me in this line of work because he enjoys this line of people. Like that's a calling. I can call these people. It's awesome.
And I'm not that great of a theologian, but I do believe that Jesus never wore a collar either. So I think it's okay. I think it fits right in. So obviously his calling was after, you know, close to 20 years as an assistant coach to now the right time. And you probably knew the insides of it, but it caught me off guard when I saw the retirement of Bill Lawson, who had also been at Kent State for quite a while, to be now the director of track and field. I told you to put a pin in it earlier when I talked about a throws coach being a head coach. And you alluded to this earlier when you talked about, you have my throwers and you're like, oh yeah, and they come at different times. That's traditionally what I see on the collegiate setting for throwers is, you know, hammer throwers come out at 9 a.m., javelin throwers at noon, one section of shot putter discus at 2, and then another at 4. You know, I'm making up times, but you know, it's not unheard of for me to hear of 2 to 3 to 4 different workout groups for throwers, because the events are so radically different. I know the long jump and triple jump's different, but it's still main component is run up is the runway, and then you do something different once you go past the takeoff board. I just ticked off every throws or every jumps coach in the world right now. They're all like, remember, I was a jumps coach. I know I oversimplified that. How do you, as a throws coach, how do you now, as the director, you're responsible for a lot more than what you were as the throws coach? How are you going to change, if at all, on how you coach in regards to not how you coach X and O's, but how you coach organizationally, also knowing that, you know, you've got other things you got to do now as the director, scheduling, budgeting, assistant coach, mentoring, etc.
Listen, I thought about it before I even applied. Number one, you know, can you do all these other things and still be a successful throws coach? But I think really the biggest key is, number one, is having the right assistant coaches around you. So Law was the type of guy who had to do most everything himself. He was going to do the hotels. He was going to do this. He was going to, and so he structured himself more dictatorial. Like I've got this handled. So then it freed up a lot of us. Like, hey, well, shoot, I've got officials and I've got my throwers. You know, I've got some odds and ends, like recruiting aspect of it, but I didn't have a ton of that head coaching stuff. So I was like, shoot, you know, the way he made it look was going to be like, man, do I want to do this? Do I want to bear that burden? And then you kind of take a step back and you're like, listen, that's not how you have to do it by any stretch. You get an assistant coach that you trust. And I brought Mike Schobert. I hired him. He was at Central Michigan, killed it up there, had more than 60 points or 62 points at our conference championships. And I knew sprinting coach wise, he's going to get the job done as far as getting the sprint stuff done. And I can trust that. And I can trust him doing some of the stuff on the day-to-day stuff. I've got a young assistant, Alex Bloom, who is crazy recruiting awesome recruiting, I can trust and rely on him. And James Croft, my distance coach, I can trust. So it's having those people you trust around you. Number one, that I'm not going to be up in the office all day by any stretch of the imagination. The other aspect of it is, my youngest is 12 years old. He's going to get on the bus at 7:30 in the morning. And once he's on the bus, I've got my 17-year-old already drives to high school. My 15-year-old can go with him. I don't have to do lunches. I don't have to get kids on the bus at 8:30. I don't have to pack everything else. My mornings have freed up massively. So I plan on being in the office, which is nice, say 8:30 to 11. Then I have group 1 that goes 11 to 12. We lift from 11 or 12 to 1. Session 2 goes from 12 to 2, lift from 2 to 3 or 4. Then after that, we've got med balls or javelins. I mean, again, you're right. We go section after section after section, what those coaches do. But I've got that morning time to come up here and, hey, what do we need to do? And the other aspect of it is this. A lot of coaches like to come up in the offices and they sit down and they just BS with their other coaches. So they'll come in and talk about this, or listen, I told my staff, when I'm in here, if I've got work to do, I'm not necessarily going to shut my door, but just shut up and I'm going to do my work. You do your work. We get our stuff done. We can have fun in the office, obviously, because I'm going to have fun wherever I am. But the idea is not to come up and chit chat. The idea is to come up for that hour or two that we need to get stuff done and get it done. And then boom, you go out and throw scope. So I think sometimes, in all honesty, we step back and we make a little bit too big of a deal about ourselves. Like, oh, as the head coach, we got so much responsibility. Listen, I did hotels. I can set that up in like less than a day. I got my schedule down. It's not uberly hard to do this stuff. It's just making time to do it, having the coaching staff in the right room, making sure we're all on the same page and proceeding with what we need to do. And if I'm not up at the office, hey, James, you did your cross country in the morning. You're in the office in the afternoon. Get some stuff done that needs to be done, because I'm not going to be up there. So it's just trusting your people for the most part.
I do wonder how much, we talk about as track coaches, the number of hours that we have to put in a week. It's not an 8 to 5 job. It's not a 40-hour week job. And I would agree with that. But I do wonder, because we don't have that structured 8 to 5, we have to clock in at 8 and out at 5. I wonder how many times we relax too much, and it's like, oh, well, I don't have to worry about, I can do the bus schedule tomorrow or 2 hours from now. And it's like, well, okay, well, there's 2 hours you didn't have to work that you could have already really worked. I just wonder if it's self-fulfilling prophecy that, it takes 400 hours a week. Well, it's because you're in the office not working, because we're typically probably not office people as track coaches.
I see it all the time. They're like, oh, we work so much. I'm thinking to myself, like they keep on saying, oh, we're so busy. I'm like, no, you just get it done. Like, literally stop procrastinating, get it done for like at that hour, and then it's taken off your plate. Like, I'm not saying you can't procrastinate, because I think that's building the relationship again, right? You need to have that relationship with the staff and the assistant coaches. And when I sit up here, my guess is I'm going to have people filter in my office. So even though I want to get stuff done, I'm always got somebody sitting in the office wanting to talk. I get that aspect of it. But the reality is, when I want to get something done, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to say, get out of my office. I got to get this done. So I think it is. We like to, I think people, people persons. We like our 100 athletes, and we like to have that discussion. We build these relationships, but if you let that relationships continue to flow into the office, then we say, oh, we're so busy. Not really. It's just your relationship building when you want to. Fine, just shut that off and get crap done and be done with it. I don't see it as hard.
And no judgment. I mean, if you I'm going to say overcompensate on that side of it, no judgment. It's just hard for you to now say, oh, I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, when in reality, you could pare it back to closer to the traditional 40. But again, no judgment. I mean, if that's how you want to,
right.
Yeah. In different parts of our lives, right? You mentioned, 12-year-old and then, 2 older ones that are in high school. That is way different than when you had a newborn and 2, almost middle schoolers, right? That life looked a lot different than what you have today and how you run it.
I don't think I would have been a head coach if I had anybody in that middle school age where I'm trying to still be a dad and I want to get home. And so no, I'm going to be at home as long as I can. Then I'm going to get done throws coaching. I'm going to go home because I'm going to be home again. Like, I've got soccer practice. I got football practice. I've got this. I got to take you to band. I've got like right now, my daughter, she just joined the golf team. So I got to drive her in the morning or pick her up at 10 and drive her to band camp at noon and come back at noon and blah, blah, blah. Well, now my 17-year-old said, hey, I got a podcast today. So you're picking people up. So it's still like life still flows around the job in and of itself, but you just got to be able to come to the office and get stuff done in your head. I mean, it's just part of the process.
Any of these kids going to be track coaches? I just heard a golf coach, which that might be the real sweet coaching gig, by the way, is become a golf coach.
No, my kids are so not who I am. My youngest, my 12-year-old's more athletic and more like, I'm going to get to it. But my oldest is like, hey, you know what? Life comes. Like, I could see him living in a van down by a river. That is Jonathan, 1000%. And I'd be like, hey, I'll visit you down by your van and down by the river, and that's where you're living. That's going to be good. My daughter, she's the 15-year-old. She'll probably become a teacher because she just likes to teach everybody and be bossy in the house. And then the 12-year-old, I think he'll be an athlete and kind of like dad, I guess. I don't know about a track coach. None of them did really track, and I don't care. Do what you want to do. Like, I've got my reptiles and my track, and I love reading my Bible in the morning, and my relationship with Christ is the most important thing. So outside of that, you guys have fun with life and do whatever floats your boat, because I don't really care.
Hey, that's healthy. Some people are listening to that right now and going, wow, that's not a good dad. I actually think, because me and you are, that's what I love learning about the people we have on the podcast. Me and you are a lot alike, my friend. That makes me feel bad for you, but we're a lot alike. Because I say the same thing. I'm like, all right, whatever you want to do, I don't care. Just go do it. Have fun. As long as you enjoy it, that's all that matters. I think that's super healthy as a parent. Being overly involved. Being involved is really, really important. I think and it's a fine line. Being overly involved, I think is an issue. We were just at the Illinois State Fair. We only went for one reason. It's because this company that does lures, fishing lures, was down there. And my son, huge fisherman. I can't stand fishing at all. Like,
Yes.
It's boring to me. I just cannot do it. He fishes 24/7. And so we literally, when he was younger, we took him to a free fishing day, because I was like, it sounds like kind of in the same vein. I was like, whatever the kids want to try, let them try. If they love it, great. If they don't, okay, whatever. And so we took him to a free fishing day, because I was like, well, maybe he'll like it. I don't know. I can't stand it, but maybe he will. And, pun intended, he was hooked the very first little dinky fish. And now he caught a 10-pound bass at camp this summer. And just, the guy's got like 200 and something lures. It's like, when I say he's addicted, and I'm like, knock yourself out, go do your thing, man. I hate to say it the way you said it, but it is true. It's like, I don't care. Just go do your thing, man. As long as you have passion, it's all good. There's our parenting tip of the podcast right there. Okay, let's go to a different kind of parenting, and something that I'm wildly fascinated by, because I'm a critter person. I used to have snakes from college up until I met my wife, who was not a snake person. I've had different types of snakes and reptiles. A good friend of mine, Jeff Hartwig, is a big reptile breeder and dealer and things like that. I don't know how I think I learned it through Facebook. See, social media is amazing. You tell me more. You breed, you sell, you have these, I'm going to probably say it wrong, and I'm going to say lizards, but they're geckos. You're going to teach me. You have some fascinating reptiles. Tell us about this. How did you get into that? What do you do with these things? Tell us more.
So I always liked animals growing up. I always had either a parakeet or a snake or a rat, or I had an iguana when I was in high school. So I'm always an animal guy. But it just has kind of evolved to like having a reptile room. And when I was younger, I had snakes, like with you, but then I got married, and the wife said, whoa, no snakes. So I was like, okay, I'm okay with no snakes. And so we ended up taking my snake, and I traded it at a pet shop for a tortoise. And and it was like a sulcata, the African sulcata tortoise, which is the 4th largest tortoise in the world. I knew it was going to get super big, but tortoises had me hooked for a little while. I loved loved who they were. But I knew once Gregory, that was his name, that was our first tortoise, he got to the size where I'm like, listen, we can't keep this tortoise forever. So I ended up selling him to a person out in California who could raise him on a big farm and do their stuff there. And I got into big research. What's the smallest tortoise? And so I had tortoises probably for a decade. But tortoises honestly are long-lived. It takes a while for them to mature. You don't even know if they're going to be males or females until year 2 or 3, sometimes 4 or 5. Like if you got big ones like Galapagoses or Aldabras, they'll take 10 or 20 years. So you got to have but I wasn't into that. So I ended up 10 years into tortoise. I'm like, listen, I'm gonna step away from the reptiles for a bit and kind of just take a break. And after a year of not having any reptiles, I was like, this is ridiculous. I have to have something. And so I ended up getting, I was into geckos for a while. So I put some money into some geckos, and I got a lot of Australian species. And the Nephrus was like Wheeleri, and I got Amiae and Levis and all these different species. And again, this is the artistic aspect of me. I would get red ones and orange ones and banded ones. And so I love the artistic, going downstairs and feeding them crickets, the whole feeding aspect of it, cleaning cages and looking at them. But after, I started with geckos in 2011, probably by about 2018 or 19, I probably had 40 of them. And yes, it was, and 40, I don't know, some people are like, oh, 40 is not bad because I have like 3,000. Well, 40 as a track coach. So I've got females that are laying eggs. I've got eggs that are incubating, popping out, and I'm always on a track trip. And so the wife has to go downstairs. And I'm like, hey, go, see if there's anything coming out of the incubator. And I've got baby cages made. Go put those 3 babies in the cage. So she is having to deal with this. And I would say by 2019, she had enough of it. She was pissed. So I was like, well, shoot, I can't not have reptiles, but I can't continue to do what I'm doing. So I end up finding, and I don't know how I didn't have them earlier, but like you said, lizards. I kind of I've shifted in the lizards aspect of it, and they're called Agurnia. The species is Agurnia, and there's essentially skinks from Australia, and they're more rare, and so they're a super high dollar. They're not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. I have one pair of Agurnia that are $10,000. I have another pair of Depressa that are $4,000, even though I'm selling them because I'm buying some Orboreus cataphractus, which are from East Africa, but they're about anywhere between $7,000 to $10,000 for a pair. So I have massive amounts of money into a couple pairs. But here's the deal. It's like, instead of having 40 geckos that end up being $20,000 or $5,000, now I only have 6 to 8 things downstairs, and they're live bearers. So they don't have eggs. They are easy with the desert. I have my hot spots on them. If they become gravid and pregnant and they have a baby, it's not like the wife has to deal with them. So everything is self-contained in my reptile room right now. High dollar species, yes, less of them, and they're self-contained. So we've done some shifting.
40 pets is a lot. 40 pets that you're breeding and taking care of, and it's I'm gonna call it a business. It's buying and selling and things like that. That's a full-time job. I never could understand with Hartwig, with being a professional pole vaulter, and then his agency and working with us, and it was doing all. I was like, where do you find the time? I mean, I know it's not it's not a every day you got to make sure something happens. Like a dog, you got to feed it every day and walk it every day, but still takes time and effort and research, and it takes time. So we're on the 40 geckos, were you breeding like trying to make specific color patterns and things like that some people do with like snakes and other
depending on what you're doing with it, like in the ball python world, like you say, the snakes, we call them color palettes, and I can't have snakes, but I love to watch. Like they have snakes that you can look up on Morph Market that are probably $20,000 just for one snake, because they have recessive, like a double recessive or a triple recessive or co-dominant genes, and they stack all these genes. There are 4 or 5 genes in a snake, and it makes their color palette look killer. But it took 20 years to develop that snake, because if you have a recessive gene, like an albino is a recessive gene, a piebald is a recessive gene, but you have an albino piebald, then that's a double recessive. And you can have recessive traits or dominant traits or co-dominant traits. And you have to really know, number one, genetics. If you're a reptile breeder, you have to know genetics, number one. Number two, you have to understand, like mine right now, you have to understand the microclimates. So even though they're an Australian species, everyone's like, oh, they like the hot desert. Well, they like the hot desert, yes, but they like it out in the hot for about an hour, and then they'll go in the cool shade where there's moisture and humidity. And so people kill their reptiles all the time because they think, oh, I've got an Australian species that likes it hot all the time. Well, did you give it water? Can you have 50 to 60% humidity underneath the log that you have? So you constantly have to understand hot spots in the cage, cool spots in the cage, microclimates. Everything has like working mechanisms. And it's just, again, I like the aspect of going home, and I am not, track and field is what I do as a job. But I don't take this job. When I get home, I more or less enjoy reading about, I was into huge eschatology, and I was into huge Adamic and pre-Adamic ages. And when God built, when we started in Genesis, or we in Revelations, and where we talk about pre-trib, post-trib, pre-wrath, all of this, I loved during COVID time. I love to study that. I also love to study my reptiles. So track and field is what I do, but I don't necessarily take it home with me. I can put it away. I'm done with coaching. I can put it to the side. And that's I think, huge mental aspect of it. I think, again, if we want to talk about coaches, if you can't have a hobby or if you can't put it down, then you're going to be in trouble 20 years in life when you have nothing else to define you other than track and field. And that's where I think a lot of people times they bounce around sometimes, is because they get 4, 5, 6 years in. You could see somebody kind of get that boredom sets in mentally, and then they need to go somewhere else. And then 4 or 5 years sets in, they get bored, or the head coach shifts and gets fired. There's other reasons, just than getting bored mentally, but I think that's an aspect of it. Got to find a hobby. My hobby is, I would have to say, not, I don't want to say Christ is my hobby, because he's my life. That's how I live my life. But reptiles is my hobby, is the thing I can go home to and have enjoyment studying, feeding, breeding, everything else. And unfortunately, like, I had just gotten some yellow tree monitors, which are awesome. They're amazing. And I spent like $5,000 to $6,000 into them this season. But now, as being a head coach, and I'm talking to my reptile people last night, I don't think I can keep them, because the time frame that the head coaching is going to be involved into is not going to allow me to keep the species, because the humidity, they need to be sprayed daily. They need to be checked daily. Eggs have to be checked. Males with females, the males will eat the eggs. If I'm not there, then we're really screwed. So I added a species that, as a throws coach, I could have handled. As a head coach, I can't handle. So
two last subjects here. I really want to touch on what I think is something really healthy that, again, I don't think we talk a lot about in the coaching body that we should be. And I work hard at, when I talk about a coach, instead of saying, hey, it's a coach and blah, 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 I like to always refer to it, the person who chooses coaching, specifically track and field, as a profession. You know, it's one of two professions where the title stays with you 24/7. So coach, right? Maybe your neighbors probably know you as coach, and, you know, kids will, you know, you've been coaching for 20 plus years. Some kid 20 years ago probably would see you and still call you coach. Not Nate, not Nathan, you know, not Mr. Fanger. It's coach. The only other profession is doctor. You probably have a doctor that lives in your neighborhood. It's, hey doc, how you doing? You know, you go to the grocery store.
Sure.
Hi doc, yeah, the dial 4. You know, no other profession. No one's there. There's no, you know, you don't call your accountant Jim. You don't call your I was going to say therapist, but that'd be a doctor. But, you know, it's one of those two titles that always stays with us. And so a lot of times we make that our life. We are coach. That is first, second, and third. And I don't want to call it today's culture, because this certainly isn't anything new, but in culture and society, we like to celebrate the grind, right? Like, oh, if you ain't grinding 24/7, if you ain't working on your craft as a coach 24/7, you know, you're doing it wrong. Have you ever heard, Finger, have you ever heard of IR theory?
No.
So the I stands for the individual, you, Nathan Finger, and the R, so you kind of make two columns. I, it's you. That's the only thing in the column, you, who God made you to be, who God wants you to be, etc. It's you. And in the R column, it's all your roles. So you specifically have a ton of roles, right? One role is a coach, one role is a teammate. You have other people in your athletic department that depend on you to do their jobs, and vice versa. Head coach is a role for you. Son is a role for you. Husband is a role. Dad, right? Reptile. What do you? Are you a reptilologist? What do we call you? Reptile keeper, breeder, whatever. What did you be? Yeah, that's a role. And so you have all these roles, and I'm missing a ton of roles. I don't. Yeah, I think you said you had brothers and sisters, right? So your brother is a role. Mentor for some people, teacher, etc. There's all these roles, right? If you were to rate yourself on any one of those, you just pick a role. Maybe as husband, you're like, you know, hey, from 1 to 10, 1, I am failing. 10, boy, I'm killing it. How am I doing as a husband today? Right? You can't be an 8, 9, or a 10 as a husband if you can't see what God has made you to be. So your I is a 10. Sometimes we feel bad, right? It's like, oh man, I'm just not a good human. It's usually societal pressures, right? I'm not doing charity work. Maybe I'm not married. Maybe you think that's what makes you a 10 because you're married to someone, which is not true, right? But if you can't see what God sees in you as a 10, well, then you can't be a 10 as a coach, or an 8 or not. You know, 8, 9, and 10 is all kind of the same thing. You're killing if you're 8, 9, 10. You can't be an 8, 9, or 10 as a dad. if you're don't understand what God sees in you and what he's made you to be, right? So part of that, where I'm getting to, is when you talk about, hey, I'm a coach, and that's important to you. That's my profession. That's what supports your family, and you love the sport, things like that. But that's not what that's not number one. Like
Right.
my faith, what sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Sounds like faith is number one. Maybe
Right.
family is number two. Maybe others is number three. And we tend to forget that self has to be in there. As coaches, it's a very selfless profession. You're giving towards others. You're giving towards others' kids. But there has to be, we sometimes forget about that. We have to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others, right? We have to take care of our health. We have to take care of future retirement, things like that. We have to do things that are selfish so that we can become and do selfless things. So I think that what you mentioned there about, hey, when I don't take my work home, when I go home, I'm in those other roles. I'm dad and husband and son, calling your parents, things like that. That's not talked about enough in our profession here as coaching track. It's easy to get on social media and with our buddies at meets and stuff and talk about, yeah, I went to this clinic and I went to this camp and I was up till 10 o'clock watching this video all over again. And then I got up at 6 and, had first weight practice. And it's like, wow, where did you, and especially with our job being on weekends, it's easy to suck up every weekend recruiting and going to meets. I think what you expressed there is something that it's not talked about enough, and it needs to be talked about more. It needs to be the common talk in my true opinion. After being a coaching advocate and talking to coaches around the country, I just think it's so important, and we're kind of dropping the ball.
Well, and I think so that's where I'm at now. But like, I've had times, if you ask my wife, and he's like, oh, man, the guy's up at 11 o'clock at night watching film, right? Because at some point in time, I was still trying to find who I was in the coaching. How do I, or what am I looking for? How am I doing this? How am I? So I think there is, like, again, ebbs and flows of life, like where I had in that first 4 or 5 years as a young coach is, how do I hone myself as a coach? What am I looking for? How am I developing this? That's a big aspect of it. And then obviously coming home and still being a dad. And that's where I find myself now more than anything. I'm not saying when the kids are out of the house, I'm like, oof, I haven't done anything track and field wise for about 5 or 6 years. I haven't done any personal development, haven't watched the film. Like, I don't know, like, let me get caught back up under this a little bit. Like, I think you've got to allow yourself to be able to go through some of those ebbs and flows in those roles, and not just stick with one. Honestly, if you're just going to be a parent and a dad, then you might not be a successful throws coach or a coach at all, because you've got to be able to have time to develop you as a person in that coaching role. Or if you can't just overload one or the other. If I'm just going to be a reptile owner and go home and just have reptiles, then good, maybe get out of the coaching profession and be a reptile guy. So it's how you balance that. Christ in our life is all about balancing it. How does he keep us balanced? Obviously you keep Christ as your centrality. That's my focal point. And how do I work that in my head around everything else? Like when you said your role as a dad, a husband, as this and that, I was thinking everything is a ministry. In my as a husband, I'm a minister. In my role as this, I'm a minister. It's where he has you. It's kingdom building thought process. I'm here to. He has me established as my kingdom, but in my kingdom revolves around the bigger aspect of his kingdom. So how do you put those roles in the mindset of he is king, he's centrality, and how you work that he's given you around his structure, right? So I don't know. I think you're right. We don't talk about it enough, and I think a lot of times coaches are 20 years in and they've only known coaching versus having a hobby and taking a deep breath and doing something else and knowing who you are as an individual. Those are key aspects of it. I love snowboarding with my sons in wintertime. Even though it's in the middle of the season, I will figure out how to do a Friday night up on a mountain somewhere, because that's huge to what I am. I'm from Montana. If I'm not snowboarding, if I'm not being a husband, if I'm not going to football practice with my 12-year-old, if I'm not having reptiles, I'm not doing what I need to do to recharge my batteries. Once every summer, I like to head out west. I didn't get to this summer, which is fine because I got a new role, but I need to be out in Montana for a week or South Dakota for a week, or I need to be those are recharging batteries and getting you back grounded to your feet, and then stepping back into the coaching role.
I knew we would find something that we didn't have in common. I'm never snowboarding. I hate snow. I'm in Illinois and I married a Chicago girl, so I ain't leaving. But Yeah, man. And I ain't going to Montana. I ain't camping. I assume when you say Montana and stuff, it's like, oh, you roughing it. Yeah. Roughing it to me is I have to choose a Hampton over a Hilton Garden Inn, man. I'm just, I'm not that tough. All right. That's why I would never been a thrower. Not tough enough at all. Well, thanks. You helped me kind of change my thinking there, Fanger, as you were talking about when I talk about, the roles and God, family, other self. You're not a you can't. I don't believe you can be a coach number 1, 2, and 3, like your profession. No other profession ask for that. No, nothing else. Business owner, etc. That might be the closest, but still. But what you kind of helped with my thinking there is the evolution of the person who chooses to be a coach. So maybe it is different year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of a coach. Maybe they do need to be 24/7 ish coach. Different things that play into theirs. Are they married or not? And, because obviously then you're responsible for other people. But maybe when you're, I was a single 20-year-old coach when I first got into it. I didn't have responsibility for anybody else outside of my athletes, so I could just do nothing but that. And then as move along, now I think about wife and 2 kids. I'm like, oh, I couldn't do that with my, I know what my personality would be, and I would be taken away from my fatherhood and my husbandry for sure. So but that evolution, and then so maybe that means coaches in your role 20 years on, 30 years on, maybe that means the evolution for that person who chooses to be a coach is to help the younger people, the newer people that are getting into coaching. Hey, at some point you're gonna do this a little different. I know I know you enjoy watching track on TV 24/7 and being at a track meet every weekend and yada yada. At some point, it's going to have to be a little different. Doesn't have to mean less passion. Doesn't have to mean less proficiency. It just means it has to maybe be different. Maybe has to go down the priority totem pole, if you will, for there. Yeah, you really there really, as you were talking, it kind of helped me change that. Okay, man. Hey, let's wrap up here. You are the new director of track and field at Kent State, a program that has had many successes. Every year there are athletes that are at nationals. This is an expectation of the program, at least from the outside. You may tell me different, which means you probably wouldn't have been the new director if that's different for you. What's got you excited, man? You got a new year coming up, new coaches. You mentioned the coach from Central Michigan. I believe he's an alum, right? I always get excited when alums come back to their alma mater. What's got you excited coming up here in the next couple of seasons as you start putting your fingerprints here on the program?
I think the biggest aspect of what we need to do is be consistent with the coaches that are here. So that my excitement is the staff that I have now is, I think, going to remain for the next 4 to 6 years, right? That is in the continuity. Like, I think the biggest aspect of not being able to win conference year after year after year is just, when you have a different coach, you have to get on the same page and learn a new system, and who do they recruit and who they not recruit. And so are we filling the right gaps? Are we filling the right holes? And if you have a turnover after turnover after turnover, it becomes a little bit, I don't know, it becomes just, not everyone's on the same page at all given time. So I think once that page becomes consistent, I think that's my goal, is to just be the top player in our conference championships first. I mean, I think that's the administration wise wants to see that. And we, for the individuals of the athletes, getting them championship rings and having them be able to really feel the success over and over and over again, that's crucial. But I also want to be relevant, possibly on the NCAA stage. So is it a thing where you can be top 20 to top 25 year after year at the national championship? I mean, you have the right people that can get the job done. I mean, it's really finding, 1, 2, 3 people. Like, I had Danielle, who ended up winning the shot put one year and 4th in the discus in the same year. And she was, just because of her alone, I think we were like 15th in the country just because of her points. So it's getting the right people in the right place to win the conference championships year after year, and see how well you can do at the big show.
Well, knowing you for a while now, having listened to your story here, knowing you talk about consistency, your personal consistency there at Kent State, I have no doubts that what you've done. And this is good friends with Bill Lawson, and he did an amazing job. It's going to be different, I think, because it's a different person in the head chair. But I think, the things that he built that he added on to what Wendell built, and he added on to what the coach before them. I think it's just a continual building process, and I'm excited to see it, man, because you are in a tough conference that did not get weaker, by the way. Maybe got tougher as as the coaches continue to develop, and we'll see what new things happen at Akron, kind of the rival of Kent State there down the road. So that'll be interesting to see. But man, we're excited to see it. We think big things are coming, and continually big things are coming, and it'll be exciting to see your like I said, that your fingerprint that you put on it. And I fully expect it'll be 80 throwers and 20 jumpers and sprinters and distance. So I'm excited just to see 100,000 throwers at Kent, Ohio.
But that's one thing though. Like literally, there's no way I'm not going to change my throw. I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to go up. I think you have to be consistent. Like I'm good and I give good points to the team. But if I had 80 points to the team, number one, I would kill us. We couldn't win conference, or I'd be too busy as the head coach. So you have to know your role. Just keep consistent. Consistency again. Know what you've done in the past. Continue to do what you've done. Figure out how to get that done. Don't add. Don't take away. Yeah, I think that's key.
I love it, man. I love it. And I'm so thankful, man. You're just starting to learn a bunch of new things, right? As the new director, and you're starting to put your plans in action. You're starting to create your plans and then put them to action. You're hiring, etc. The kids probably come back to school here any day now. So cross country season is literally a blink away, which means fall practice is a snap away. For you to give us today's time, man, it means the world to us. Your journey is important. It's one of the reasons why we started this podcast, because we truly believe the people who choose to be track coaches, your journey is important. What's awesome about your journey specifically, if it were a book, if I use the example of a book, we maybe we're getting close to halfway through that book, which means there is a whole mess more to go, man. There's a lot of chapters to be written in your journey. And, it's like you're barely at the 200-meter mark for a 400. I have no hammer analogy for that, so I'm just going to use the 400. But you're barely getting to that 200-meter split, which is exciting because you have a lot of things built up, and there's a lot of things ahead of you for the program and the Golden Flash, which is pretty exciting, man. And so I'm just so thankful for your time today and being here with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys putting me on. It's been fun.
Absolutely.
I was like,
awesome, man. I told you we'd have fun, man. Throwers, I don't know. They're a different breed, and I mean that in all the best ways. That's one of his roles, by the way, thrower, right? I mean, that's quite amazing. Thank you for being here today and listening to us. Again, just super humbled that you spent any time with us. And here we just did an hour and a half with just another amazing person who, thank goodness, this guy could have been an art teacher. I wouldn't have interviewed him if he was an art teacher somewhere, right? Thank goodness he became a track coach and has affected so many young people's lives in positive manner. So many of his kids have gone on to be coaches, have gone on to be parents, business owners. I mean, that's the real impact of a track coach, whether you're at Kent, Ohio, Eufaula, Alabama, Los Angeles, California, it don't matter. You affect young people in positive manners. And that is your ultimate gift to this world for being a track coach, man. I'm just so thankful for you. So join us next week. We'll do it all over again. We'll get another guy or gal who just chooses to spend a lot of time with me, and we'll explore their journey and see what kind of value we can bring out of them. Have a great day.
Thanks, man.